Welcome to Monday and this edition of The Advance. I'm Michael Quinn Sullivan, sitting here with Brandon Waltons. Brandon, of course, senior editor of Texas Scorecard. Don't want to steal Sidney Henry's title. And I'm the publisher. Excited to be sitting with you today as we begin the second week of the first called session, the first special session of the 89th legislature. Brandon, there are 18 things on the governor's agenda. You now have about 200 pieces of legislation have been filed in the House, about 40 pieces of legislation filed in the Senate. But right now, all the emphasis is on congressional redistricting.
That's certainly been what has gotten the most attention, certainly from a news perspective. And certainly, I think people who maybe know just a little bit about the special session will know that they are being called there to redraw some of the congressional maps, potentially in a way to benefit Republicans, to redraw the districts, to give Republicans an edge, to maybe take back up to 5 more seats, as President Donald Trump has said that he wants to see happen. Important to note, though, as of right now, different people have drawn their own maps about what that could look like, and they've submitted them. There are no official maps that are being considered right now. The House doesn't have any. The Senate doesn't have any. Instead, what they've been doing, as they are required to do, they have to hold some hearings, some committee hearings about this issue. And the House and the Senate have both been doing that over the past several days. Over the weekend, they're continuing even today. Both the House and the Senate, their redistricting committees are holding hearings. The House is having it in Arlington. They had a hearing in Houston on Saturday. Meanwhile, the Senate has been holding all of their hearings virtually, so people have been able to come in basically via video chat and have their 2 minutes to give their peace of mind. And what we've seen as far as testimony on these things is pretty much exactly what you would expect, right? It's Democrats that have been mobilized to come out. You had hundreds of people come out in Houston trying to essentially say the Democrats' talking points, which is, Texas needs to not listen to Trump and, needs to not do this, which is to be expected from the party that's not in power in any redistricting case, right? What's actually going to be important is what happens next once we see these actual maps proposed in the House and the Senate, because as of right now, it's just conversation. It's just committee hearings. It's just testimony from folks. We're going to be looking forward to seeing what these maps actually look like.
Now, it was fascinating this past weekend. You saw a small group of Democrats, a dozen Democrats from the Texas House go to California to stand there in solidarity with Gavin Newsom for some reason or other. But they were very clear and point. We are not busting quorum. There's no meeting today, no meeting this weekend. All of the talk about busting quorum that was coming from Democrats, including Ron Reynolds, the chair of the Congressional the Legislative Black Caucus, including from Gene Wu, including all the guys who were kind of hinting around at it. So far, they're not playing that game.
Well, no, but again, that would be, I would say, certainly a good sign. Any day that they're showing up, I guess, is a good thing as far as keeping the process move along. For a quorum,
how you define a good thing is a challenge there.
But at the same time, there's not really anything for them to fight yet. Like I said, we don't actually have an actual plan. There's no bills that are being voted on this issue, and so it wouldn't surprise me that if they were to decide to break quorum, that they would decide to do it a little later on. Keep in mind that if they do it that way, it actually makes the potential cost to them a little bit less, because there are rules that say now that they could be fined a certain amount of money per day per member that's gone, and that adds up. So if they decide to skip out on just the last 2 weeks or last week of session, that essentially accomplishes the same thing for them. Right now, I think they want to be seen as, we're here fighting and we're listening and we're gonna take this all into consideration, and then they're going to decide what to do, I guess, once we get closer to the end of the session.
So this morning, the Texas House gavelled in for all of about 6 minutes. They registered a quorum. They prayed. They said the pledges to the U.S. and the Texas flag, and then they were done with legislation being read for the first time, which is kind of that process by which all legislation has to move through, even a special session has to move through the process. The Senate is coming in here in about an hour and a half. They're going to be gaveling in. They actually potentially could be voting on a couple of big items, including the ban on THC and taxpayer-funded lobbying. Tell us about
Yes. So I think important to note first on the House side of things, they adjourned pending the reading referral of bills. So we would expect to see that between now and Wednesday, whenever the House is scheduled to come back, they should be on track now to start referring some of these bills to committee, which is, one of the first steps in the process.
Right.
But it's one that the Senate has gotten a leg up on, at least for a few issues. And now we're seeing the fruits of that. Last week, you had the Senate State Affairs Committee hearing 3 big bills that are off of the special session agenda list, which
Right.
is that THC ban that Lieutenant Governor Dan Patrick and the Senate have been especially strong in favor of, that Governor Abbott vetoed, but then put it back on the call with some different language. And now essentially it's a little bit muddy as to what his position is on the issue now, because he says that he's in favor of banning THC for adults and for children, but doesn't want to necessarily say he supported the bill from last time. However, the bill that's in front of them this time is essentially the same. If this sounds confusing, you're not alone. It is actually a very confusing thing right now. No one's quite sure, frankly, where the governor stands on the bill as it's going through now. But either way, the bill that's being called a ban on THC, that Lieutenant Governor Dan Patrick has called a ban on THC, was heard in committee last week, along with a ban on taxpayer-funded lobbying and legislation to restore the Attorney General's power to go after voter fraud. All 3 of those issues moved very quickly out of the Senate State Affairs Committee last week, and now, as they are scheduled to meet this afternoon, all 3 bills are on the Senate intent calendar, meaning they could pass them potentially as early as this afternoon.
So we're at this interesting place, it feels like, where you now have a couple, 3 dozen members of the Texas House who have signed pledges saying that they're ready to vote to ban taxpayer-funded lobbying. But this spring, you kind of saw this happen already, where the Texas Senate passed a ban, kind of watered down, but they passed a ban on taxpayer-funded lobbying. It went to the House, where the chair of the State Affairs Committee in the House, Ken King, said, no, we're not going to advance anything in taxpayer-funded lobbying. We're not going to ban taxpayer-funded lobbying. And it didn't have a hearing, didn't do anything. What has changed? Or has anything? Or I mean, I guess that's what we'll see in the next 2 weeks, if anything has changed in the House.
Well, I mean, I guess one thing that has changed is that Governor Abbott has put it on the call, right, for the special session. So he's said that this is something he wants lawmakers to consider. That certainly,
of course, he said that
a little bit more weight on it.
He said that previously too.
Yeah, it's never been an item on a special session agenda, though,
right.
Which is a big deal for this issue. Governor Abbott has supported the issue, and he's certainly been supportive of it over the years,
right.
But never has it made it to the point where it's on a special session agenda.
Yeah,
of course, that's only as that list is important, but it's only as important as the what ultimately matters, I should say, is whether or not the bills actually move through the chambers. He can't force necessarily a bill to pass through. And so has anything changed? I don't know. What will be very telling is to see when the priority bill is filed for this. And right now, there have been a number of bills filed in the House that are aimed at ending taxpayer-funded lobbying. None of them have been given low numbers, which would tell you that those are probably not the ones that leadership, Speaker Dustin Burrows, et cetera, are planning on moving. What will actually be the most telling is, okay, is this a bill that's going to be referred to Ken King, who chairs State Affairs, where he killed it last time? Or are they going to refer it to a different committee? Are they going to give it to a different sponsor, different author? That will tell us a lot as to whether or not the House actually does intend to pass it this time.
Right. All right. Back on THC for a second. The ban from the regular session passed with big numbers, both out of the Senate, out of the House, had to be vetoed by the governor. The governor vetoed it. Originally, the Senate and the House took very different approaches in the regular session. In the special session, the House and the Senate versions of what they're doing with THC are almost identical. And again, identical to what the Senate wanted originally and then what was passed, which indicates that the legislators, the legislative branch has they're all pretty ready to go with this, as opposed to, again, like you said, it's still that governor is the question.
Sure. And the governor did some interviews last week where he said, he hadn't really looked at the specific bill now, so he couldn't say whether or not he supported the specific bill. But the things he was saying about what he would like to see, such as essentially banning products that have any serious amount of THC, that would go in line with the bill that he vetoed previously. So now you have the House and the Senate essentially considering almost identical versions of this, which are essentially like a ban, very similar to what both chambers passed earlier this year, and that was vetoed. And so has something, what has changed in the last month and a half? I'm not sure. Obviously, we know that this was an issue that created a rare public rift between Governor Abbott and Lieutenant Governor Dan Patrick. And so, what kind of conversations have happened there, I don't know. But certainly we do seem to be moving much closer to something that we would say looks like a ban, like the Senate and like the House ultimately voted to approve back in May.
So we've got the Senate meeting this afternoon. We've got the House not meeting again as the full chamber until Wednesday. What do you think we should be expecting to come out of this week? When we get together next Monday, what do you expect to have happened?
Well, it'll be interesting to see what the Senate decides to take on next, right? So they decided to pick these three bills, the THC, taxpayer-funded lobbying, and the election integrity legislation, as sort of their first three bills to move through state affairs and then to now put on the calendar, probably to pass out here. I would expect that there'll be some more committee hearings scheduled in the Senate this week, essentially on another package of bills. The House, I think the issues that I would expect to see them tackle first are things more related to water projects and reaction to the flooding from earlier this month. There's a number of items on the call related to that. Those, I think, are more likely to get quicker attention in the House than maybe some of these more hot button conservative issues.
Outstanding. Hey, all right. So if you have questions about the legislative process next week, we'll get together on Monday. Happy to address those. So those in the comments here on wherever you happen to be watching. I will look for those, see what we can address next week. But for now, thanks for joining us on this edition of The Advance.
Thank you.